Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Dean, Dean of the Kenan-Flagler Business School, and I'd like to welcome you to the first event in this year's Dean Speaker Series. The Dean Speaker Series was created in order to bring to campus outstanding scholars and leaders in the field of business, education, and government to share insights with UNC Kenan-Flagler, the university community, and the community at large. The Dean Speaker Series is made possible through support of the Archie K. Davis Endowment and is managed primarily by our students who select and invite the leaders from whom they are most interested in learning. At the conclusion of this evening's lecture, Andrew Peterson, Assistant Professor of Marketing at UNC Kenan-Flagler, will offer a vote of thanks to our speaker on behalf of the faculty, staff, and students. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I'd like to recognize several individuals. First, we are honored to have with us tonight members of the Kenan-Flagler Dean Circle, a group that represents some of our most generous and loyal donors. We're also pleased to have with us tonight Jack Evans, former Dean of Kenan-Flagler, and his wife Pat, as well as Bill Starling, current chair of the Kenan-Flagler Board of Visitors, and his son Greg. Tonight we are honored to welcome Tom Long to UNC Kenan-Flagler. Tom is, we're very proud to say, a UNC graduate, having received a degree in English in 1981, and prior to becoming CEO in the last year, was president and chief commercial officer of MillerCoors. He joined the company as chief marketing officer in 2005 and has held senior global positions in sales, marketing, and general management, working in more than 60 countries. Tom spent 17 years at the Coca-Cola Company, where he held a variety of positions, including Vice President of Strategic Marketing for Global Brands, Vice President of Strategic Marketing Research, and President of Coca-Cola's Great Britain and Ireland Division. He also serves as Vice Chairman of the Beer Institute. I've got to say that I thought several of our students were in that role, but apparently Tom has got that one locked up. But I do note that he's the Vice Chairman. He's also a member of the Board of Directors of Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, the Milwaukee Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce, and the Greater Milwaukee Committee. He is joined tonight by his wife Elizabeth, his daughter Stuart, who is a current senior in the Kenan-Flagler undergraduate business program, and his daughter Rawlings, who is a UNC sophomore. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest speaker, Tom Long.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Good. What a nice crowd, Jim. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'll have you note this beer is not opened, but we didn't want to miss an opportunity to brand, so here it is. I'll protect that label a little better. Tom Cawley, thank you so much for shepherding me around today, and Tracy Schwang, thank you so much. It's been great to see all your energy and to carry me around as you have all day. It's been coming home weekend for me. It's been parents' weekend with my daughters. I've been here since Friday night, and I'm certain I haven't been at the University of North Carolina for more than a day and a half since I left. And it's well past time for me to have come back. I'm happy to be here today to talk a little bit about beer. But looking in the audience, I know some of you are experts already. You know so much about the stuff, so I've asked for a couple of hand signals from some trusty friends there. I'm looking for this signal if it's too long, this signal if I should really bail out quickly, or this signal if it's really good and keep rolling. So I'll immediately recognize that I have an educated beer audience. I'll try to hit the highlights and move rapidly through. The theme of my speech today is evolution, because the beer business is a very fast-paced business. As you might imagine, it's all about culture and it's all about great products. And the Research Triangle area is not only known for great innovation in technology and education, it's also a wonderful hotbed of entrepreneurial spirit in the beer industry, and one that we are participating in. Beer is an ancient product. It's 7,000 years old. It's all natural. It's brewed with just barley and wheat and hops. The barriers to entry are low, and the creativity is very high. It has over 3,000 flavor notes in it. I see some folks that have discovered all of them. It's fun and it's exciting and it's fast-paced, so it's a great industry to be in. The next slide is really the theme of the speech. If you want a revolution, the only solution is evolve. And some of you know that Gatorade spot that I thought was so good. The CMO of Gatorade now works for us and is in charge of brand strategy, so I didn't think it would be too bad for me to lift his lyrics with no permission at all. It goes like, if you want a revolution, the only solution, evolve, you gotta evolve. So if you know that song, you'll know that captures beer very well. The winners in beer have been able to adapt and to adapt pretty rapidly to changing culture. And the winners, well, they just haven't fared so well, and they've been left behind. And beer is a cultural movement in America right now, and I want to walk you through it, and I'll start a little bit with some history. So let's get started. The next slide is a quote from Ben Franklin. I didn't make this up. And there are other equally powerful statements from our founding fathers on the virtues of beer. And you've probably seen this quote. But beer was around much longer than Ben Franklin. And in fact, it's been a part of America's culture since its founding. There is a rogue competitor who's traded on that convention. The name of the brewery is Sam Adams. And undoubtedly, he's traded on the fact that one of our patriots was actually a brewer, as well as a patriot. But beer's been around since the dawn of human civilization. Beer's roots, you'll see on the next page, next slide please, stem back from the Sumerians, and they started growing barley and mixing it with hops probably around 4000 BC. We think that they discovered it by accident. It was a happy accident. And beer became a vital part of the culture of the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, and the Hebrews, the Chinese, and even the Incas. It was bartered for trade, and labor was often paid rather in money, but in foodstuffs and in beer. And as hunters and gatherers spread throughout the continents, they took beer with them. And in the Middle Ages, like so many other things, it finally arrived in Europe, and thankfully the monks began to perfect it at that time. But after the Middle Ages, it grew rapidly in Europe, and it was carried, as I say, by Celtic monks, by the Belgian monks, the Trappist monks. And so it has a rich heritage there that you even find in beer making today. It survives in Europe. But two German entrepreneurs carried on their tradition into America. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you. These folks are Frederick Miller and Adolf Coors, relatively dour-looking gentlemen. But when they arrived in America, it was pretty tough. Frederick Miller literally stuffed yeast in a handkerchief in his pocket and took it on the boat across to America, and he kept the yeast moist. That same yeast strain is the yeast strain for Miller High Life today. It's amazing that yeast strain stayed alive. Adolf Coors stowed away on a ship. I don't know exactly where. We haven't quite figured out that. But he didn't pay any freight. And he didn't pay his way, and he kept trekking across America, and both of them did actually, in search of fresh water. Frederick Miller stopped in Milwaukee because the Great Lakes were a wonderful source of fresh water, and there are caves there where he could let the beer finish and stay cool in the mountains. And he established the Plank Road Brewery there in the mid-1800s in 1854. And just a few years later, Adolf Coors started his brewery in Golden, Colorado in 1873. And they got their breweries up and running in a time when America was growing rapidly. In Golden, Colorado, you might know, is the first capital of the state of Colorado, and he was slaking the thirst of miners everywhere. In fact, Coors Banquet, which many of you probably took across state lines in the trunk of your car back in the day, was named the banquet beer because thirsty miners needed something to reward themselves with back in the 1870s and 80s for a hard day's work, and they drank Coors beer. And so beer grew really rapidly in the United States from the mid-1800s to Prohibition. And in Prohibition, everything came to a screeching halt. If you take a look at the next slide, it was ratified into law in 1990 and went into effect in 1920. And at that time, all the entrepreneurs that were in beer, and there were about 4,000 breweries in the United States at that time, they had to figure out a way to stay in business. The Coors family was rather more creative than the Miller family. The Coors family got into ceramics at the time and got into malted products. And you might know the Coors family still has a ceramics business that is one of the largest suppliers to the U.S. military in the world of ceramic parts for high heat equipment that we use to protect our country. But they use malted milk and malt syrup, anything that they could to stay alive during Prohibition. In 1933, there were 331 breweries. To the next page. That's from 4,000 down to 331. So regulation still plays a part in American business, and you can see the effect here. In 1965, it was down to 126 breweries, and today it's back up, I'm glad to say, to 1,693 breweries, about 1,700. And for next year, we've already got about 500 breweries under construction now in the United States. So what you see in the beer industry is not unlike what you see in lots of industries across the globe right now, a time of great consolidation, and then at the very top end, at the most expensive part of the market, massive fragmentation. And that's going on in most all developed markets around the world, in cosmetics and high-end luxury goods and accessories and fashion, and also in beer. So as you look at MillerCoors, we saw a great opportunity to take on a beast of a competitor called Anheuser-Busch. So we were trying to level the playing field. This is in about 2008. The object of our business case was to knock that crown off the red stripe up there. We haven't quite done it, but we're getting some assistance, which we're grateful for. We put Miller and Coors together. It created a much bigger competitor. We have about 30% of the industry. We didn't realize that Anheuser-Busch would allow themselves to get bought by InBev and then become, not twice as big as we, but 4 or 5 times as big as we. So had we not merged, we would have been in real trouble. Nevertheless, we created a new company out of these two fierce competitors, Miller and Coors. Miller based in Milwaukee, Coors based in Golden, Colorado, and we put our headquarters in Chicago. And I'm delighted because I can take a train ride back to Milwaukee whenever I want and don't have to get on an airplane. So I feel like we won that one. Putting two competitors together is a daunting task. As you can imagine, the survivors of the Long March at Coors and Miller all think that their way was the best way. Thankfully, this wasn't like putting microchips and cement together. It was two brewers, and we did the same thing. So after we put people in the room and let them hash it out and have good, courageous conversations with one another, most of the time, folks agreed that there was a good way to do it. And within a year or so, even our brewmasters began to believe that the other guy knew how to brew his beer. It's a natural product, so it's not easy. When we think about brewing beer, you probably think that's really got to be easy. You can probably just do it in your bathtub, and stir it up and add a little hops and malt and barley and get on with it. It's very crafty and guild-like. The shape of your fermenters, the nature of the water that you use, all changes the taste of beer. And it's actually very complex. The Coors people had the world's biggest brewery in Golden, Colorado. They thought for generations, they're 5th generation brewers, that nobody else anywhere in the world could possibly brew their beer. It took Miller about 2 years to do it, but they were able to do it. And now we can brew Coors Light instead of in one brewery and trek it all over the world, or all over the United States, we can brew it in 6 breweries, and we've got 2 or 3 more breweries to get it in, and we can get you fresher beer faster. So it was a colossal undertaking to put these competitors together. We're not done with it yet. It usually takes 5 to 7 years. Thankfully, we've hired about 4,000 new people. Those new people don't remember Coors and don't remember Miller. They only remember MillerCoors. And when any of us talk about Miller or Coors, they look at you like you have 4 eyes. And so our culture is now changing for the better as one powerful company. Let's look at the next slide and say what's happening with beer. This slide is just simply to say that the industry is beginning to evolve. You know, when I grew up, there were beer drinkers, and there were Scotch drinkers, and maybe there were, you know, wine drinkers, and they were red or white wine drinkers. And now folks drink a little of everything if they choose to drink it all. Just 5 years ago, the average American who drank beer drank 3.3 different beer brands a month. Now, the average American who drinks beer drinks an average of 8.5 beers a month. It's a colossal fragmentation. Most of you got some gray hair like me, probably are drinking the same thing you were drinking a decade ago. Most of the students here are trying something different every week or at every occasion. They drink something with food. They drink something for late night. They drink something for wind-up occasions. They drink something for refreshment at a ball game. And they drink something very different by occasion. So it's opened up an enormous amount of opportunity for new beers to enter the market. We also have to compete more with wine and spirits because that same person may have a wine with their food, a beer beforehand, and an aperitif before going to bed. So there's a blurring of the use of alcohol like there has never been before. And there comes our evolving strategy. What do we have to do in beer? We have to have a lot more brands than we've ever had before. And the notion of having one big brewery out in Golden that can run for hours and days to run Coors Light or Coors Banquet is no longer. It's all about flexibility, short runs, beers with more personality. So you see on the left, Leinenkugel's is America's 4th largest craft beer. You may have never heard of it. You probably haven't. But it's quite a nice line of beers up in the northern Midwest. I'll show you a spot or two. Pilsner Urquell is the #1 beer in the Czech Republic. Blue Moon is the United States' largest single craft beer. We call it a 16-year overnight success story. It started out in Coors Field. If you've ever seen this brewery, you wouldn't drink from it, but we've cleaned it up. An entrepreneur started it, a guy named Keith Villa, made a little batch of it at the Coors Brewery because we had a bar out there, and we were inviting people to come in to try Coors beers, and he was playing around, and he had gotten his PhD in brewing science in Belgium, and so he launched this Belgian white, and he called it Blue Moon. And all the marketers did everything they could to kill it. We killed it 3 times, and thankfully some independent distributors were smart enough to say, I got some people who really like this. I think I can sell it. And thankfully some small distributors up around Colorado Springs kept it from dying, and gradually it just took hold, and through word of mouth, no advertising, 16 years until this year, it became America's biggest craft beer. Peroni is the #1 beer in Italy. It's all about Italian style, and a great beer. We introduced a new sector called the Super Lights that was invented by Miller Genuine Draft. It has 64 calories, 2.8% alcohol. It's quite a good, responsible beer because you can stay in control, still enjoy beer. Average American male can metabolize 3 of these in an hour. I mean, that's and not have any consequence with law enforcement or anything else. So it's quite good. I'm about average. And then of course you have Coors Light and Miller Lite and a whole range of other beers. This is about 1/3 of our portfolio, and I won't bore you going through all of them. Let's go on to the next slide. And even though there's an explosion in craft beers, these are India Pale Ales and wheat beers and all sorts of stouts and porters and all sorts of shapes and configuration. Trappist Belgian Abbey beers, and just lovely different kinds of beer types. Light beers are still about half of the American beer. We call them American lagers, light American lagers. And the reason is they're just very refreshing and they're very consistent. And they are about 70% of our gross margin. So we'll still have a strong focus on these beers, but our company's having to evolve again. Heck, we just merged 3 years ago, and now we've got to change our entire brewing strategy to brew lots of small batches and to create a new company, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But I'm going to show you some of the old television ads that we used to run. I hope it'll illustrate the way beer has changed. These beers, if you included Budweiser, don't run it quite yet.
Hey, dragger racing!
We wanted to watch the dog show.
Okay, we can watch both. Sunday! Miller Lite presents the Wiener Dog Winter Nationals! It's Muffy versus Dogzilla. And here they come, Bob. Brought to you by Miller Lite. If you can combine great taste with less filling, you can combine anything. And Muffy takes it. That's one fast Wiener Dog! Great taste, less filling. Can your beer do this? This is good beer.
Yeah, that's a little humble pie, I got to tell you. The primary role of these ads was simply to generate awareness because the beers weren't that differentiated. Bud Light, Coors Light, Miller Lite. Miller Lite invented the sector, but there was a lot of a sameness going on. And so the marketing of the beers was all about entertaining you and who had the coolest beer. You remember things like Spuds McKenzie, What's Up? You remember that? That sort of thing. And these were really made in a time when all beer was light lager. Today, we really got to focus a lot more on the benefit structure of the beer and what's inside the bottle, the intrinsics. So let's take a look at some of the advertising that we're running today. I hope you'll see a little bit better benefit structure, even in these light American lagers.
This chick. This chick's rocking your bro on the dance floor. But she's towing an anchor, a junior investment banker who's talking about herself and not much more. Oh, oh. So buy her a beer, it's the reason you're here. Mighty wingman, you're taking one for the team, so your buddy can live the dream. Wingman.
So if you thought the first one was bad, that's really bad. All right, so that's the second of the old school ads. Now I'm hoping that you'll see on the next couple of ads a little more benefit structure on taste and refreshment. These are the ones I'm responsible for. Let's run the tape.
You think you colder than me? Turn on the radio, me. Turn on the TV, me. Turn on the movies, me. So what you got?
Coors Light?
Don't mean nothing.
Ice Cube is cold, but Coors Light is super cold.
Oh, it's on now.
Frost brewed Coors Light, the world's most refreshing beer.
This is a new line called the coaching spot.
I host a pretty good game, but to be the best, I needed a little coaching.
That's where I came in. The world's best party needs the world's most refreshing beer. Stack that Coors Light. Make those mountains brew. You're dogging it, ding dong. Wake up. These are frost-brewed fundamentals. Work it, hit it. Gee whiz, Kyle.
When it comes to big refreshment, we could all use a little coaching. Frost-brewed Coors Light, the game's most refreshing beer.
Coach?
We still don't take ourselves too seriously. Let's take a look at Miller Lite's, a couple of Miller Lite spots.
Something to drink?
Oh yeah, take a light beer.
More taste or less taste?
I don't really care about taste.
Well, when you're done hitting off the ladies, Dee, I'll come back and give you a Miller Lite.
You the man!
Man up and choose a light beer with more taste. Grab a triple hops brewed Miller Lite with that great Pilsner taste.
Got a Miller Lite. Nice. Where you going? Ladies' tea. Let's go.
Whoa, that's not a Miller Lite.
Oh, light beer is light beer.
No, Miller Lite has more taste.
That's strike 2. One more, I'm taking your man card. My man card? What was strike 1? Hey, B, I'm going to the bathroom. You coming?
What?
Come on. Together.
You're right.
Man up and choose a light beer with more taste. Grab a triple hops brewed Miller Lite with that great Pilsner taste.
Ladies' room? Phil, you coming?
Yeah. So, look, we're not taking beer that seriously, and I hope you don't either. But we are trying to get the benefit structure of taste and refreshment through, and it seems to be working pretty well. So, when you want a light beer with a little more taste, we hope you'll take Miller Lite, and we hope you'll recognize that the only beer that can be as cold as the Rockies with pure Rocky Mountain water is Coors Light. Now, a big part of growth in America is the changing demographics across America. Any of you paid any attention to the census, you'll know that there's a huge demographic shift towards Hispanic and as well a number of other multicultural groups. And capturing these groups for the beer business is as important as anything we can possibly do. So we have a huge effort to convince Hispanic drinkers to adopt American light lagers, even as we market our beers from Latin America. We have many, like Cristal and Aguila and Cascaña from Peru and a number of others. We are trying to bring Hispanics into the American light beer category. So we've launched a digital platform that uses a lot of technology about our sponsorship of the Primera Division of football. And what you're about to see isn't an ad, but it's a video that we developed to drive excitement for our sales force. So I'll just give you a peek under the tent of that, and then you can check it out for yourselves. And then we'll go on to our new company. You're probably wondering, why do we do all that? And if it weren't for all these young people, we probably wouldn't. But young people are interacting with brands so differently than folks of my generation. They want experiences. They're on their mobile devices. They want to know where should they go that night, where their friends going to be, what platforms can they engage in. Are they watching the football tonight? What brands can actually excite them and give them access to things that they couldn't get on their own? And so the brands of the future are engaging young people in not only where they're going this evening, but they're engaging them in their passion points and demonstrate a connection to both who they are and where they want to go. And for that reason, we've got to get our distributors in all the markets like Raleigh-Durham to think in that way and to connect locally with all our consumers. So that's why we're doing it. Now, the next slide suggests a new company that we just formed last year. It's called 10th and Blake. And 10th Street is where our Leinenkugel's brewery is in Milwaukee, and Blake is the intersection at Coors Field where the Blue Moon Brewing Company originally began to brew Blue Moon. And we have 2 or 3 other small breweries around the country, the Henry Weinhardt's Brewery and a couple of others. But this company, it was formed just to handle our crafts and imports, to hand sell and go in bars and taverns and talk to bartenders and consumers about our ingredients, the authenticity of our beers, and where they come from. All of the folks that work at 10th and Blake have been trained as beer merchants, and many of them are cicerones. Cicerones are the equivalent of the wine stewards or the sommeliers that you see in the wine industry. And so they're deeply schooled in the intrinsics of the beer. They know the ingredients, they know the terroir from which the hops come. All of these things that you probably don't associate with beer, but if you study beer, you'll find that this is emerging as a sector that will be at least as complex as wine and probably more varied because it's grown in more areas, and the combination of barley and hops gives you many more flavor varieties than you can do with grapes as we know them today. So this company is selling alongside our core company and kind of a skunk works approach, giving our more expensive intrinsically oriented beers the kind of attention they need. It is a bold experiment to see if our big company can work side by side with a small dedicated company. The interesting thing is the young people are flocking to 10th and Blake. We simply cannot hire everybody that's knocking on our door. People really, really want to work in this company. They've created a totally different culture. And it's with a guy named Tom Cardella, who helped launch Stella Artois in the United States, if you know that beer. One of the challenges that right away was what do they do with Blue Moon? This is a beer that started tiny, word-of-mouth beer, and 16 years later, it's pretty big. And lots of competitors, lots of craft beers are starting to knock it off. In fact, they're making very similar formulas and moving rapidly to take its space. So we figured we better accelerate the adoption of this brand. And how do we do it? Well, we do it digitally, but maybe we ought to use some television advertising for all of you fine folks that haven't tried it yet, so that you could see it on television and have one for yourself before you were forced to try a lesser product. And so the challenge was how to make a television commercial that the people that had grown to love Blue Moon felt didn't sell out to big company values with big television, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope what you're going to see next, I have been surprised by a spot so far, so I could be surprised again, but I hope the next spot you'll see is our introductory spot of how we launched Blue Moon and try to do it in an artfully crafted way. Let's take a look. Surprised, but a little bit. That's the launch spot for the Blue Moon seasonals. We have 4 seasonal beers, and I hope it was clear to you. Now, there's another big craft beer that we have called Leinenkugel's, and if you can say it, you can love it. It is run by 5th generation brewers. We own the brewery, but Jake and Dick and John Leinenkugel run it. It's a little town called Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. It is very cold up there, but lovely in the summer. And that brewery started to slake the thirst of the loggers that were moving timber out from the border of Canada and the United States. So let's take a look at how the Leinenkugel family is welcoming the urban Chicagoans into the outdoor culture of Leinenkugels. Let's run that spot.
Out here, this is the L.
And this is the loop.
This is where the Cubs play.
And we have plenty of white socks.
I'm Jake.
I'm John.
And we're Leinenkugels. And for 5 generations, we've been brewing America's friendliest craft beers.
For America's friendliest big city.
From our sweet home to yours.
So join us, Chicago.
You're going to like it out here.
So that's working really well. The next bit is a little bit about below premiums. This is a conundrum in American business. If any of you can explain it, I'd like you to please see me after the show here. This is the longest and deepest recession America's had since the Great Depression. It is not only the steepest recession, the length of time that unemployment has persisted is significantly longer than any other recession that we've had. And this is a trend that has begun to occur, that the recessions have become deeper and longer. And this is the deepest progression that we've seen. And so beer has historically been known to be recession-proof, but it isn't. For the first year of the recession, economy beers, these are beers that are priced less than premium beers, exploded and went up at double-digit pace. But at about 18 months, all the brewers that participate in this sector saw economy beers begin to decline. And they have declined at a 10% pace since about month 20 of the recession. And you wonder why. And I worked for Coke for a long time, and we had some recessions in the 17 years I was there. And you began to see people when they reconciled to themselves that they weren't going to be able to buy a washing machine or a new car, that they began to trade up into affordables that were a little bit of luxury that they could afford. And you saw trusted brands like Campbell's Soup and Coca-Cola and chocolates begin to creep up in sales. And we believe that that's what's happening in crafts, that people aren't drinking 3 or 4 beers in the bar anymore with their friends. They may be taking a 6-pack home. But if they're going to drink one beer, they'll indulge themselves in a more expensive beer. And so these beers that we have, which we expected to be very strong in the recession, actually haven't been too strong at all. And so, and nevertheless, Americans do need beer that they can afford. Otherwise, we'll begin to have private label beers, and who would want that? And so we have begun to take packaging cost and some other elements to economize on these beers so that we don't take anything out of the ingredients, but some of the packaging we do take out. Nevertheless, it is an important sector, and we have a couple of spots, I think, to show you there, unless I missed my guess.
Hit it, fellas. I heard we got a bunch of vets of Iraq and Afghanistan living the high life in here. Hey, am I in the right section? What's going on, man? Throw my people some hot dogs. They hungry. With this crew, I'm the safest man in this stadium. I like that. Let's make some noise for the vets of Iraq and Afghanistan. This is your front line, America. When you turn in your High Life bottle caps and pull tabs, 10 cents is donated to give vets a piece of the High Life, like tickets to a game like this. Right, guys? Yeah.
Gwen, you skate.
It's my leg.
Hold my stones.
What's your name?
My name? It's Keith Stone.
Oh, Keith Stone, you're so smooth.
Always.
Keystone Light is always smooth, like Keith Stone.
If you don't like Keith Stone, you're probably my age or older. Young people seem to like him. I hadn't figured out why, and I'm glad I'm not chief marketing officer anymore. But the point of that is, for Miller High Life, is a common sense beer for people who don't need highfalutin beer to determine who they are. And if you're from Roxborough, North Carolina, that resonates. So that's my favorite beer. There's an emerging segment we're playing in, cider. This is flavored malt beverages on the left, a brand called Sparks. We'll probably play in things like coconut water and all these adjacencies. So all of you that like cosmopolitans in the bar, you'll probably be able to get a malt beverage that tastes like it from us in some time. But we will continue to be responsible and hold the alcohol content low. I would say, in all seriousness, MillerCoors has decided we make no product that's over 8% in our core alcohol line, in our core beer line. And so as you think about spirits and wine and beer, beer remains the beverage of moderation, and that's been our commitment. In the craft sector, where the alcohol levels are higher because of the nature of the brewing approach, some of these beers that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years have always been brewed with higher alcohol levels. If their heritage is authentic with a higher alcohol content, we'll let them go higher. But we do adhere to a strict 8% alcohol level, and the government participates in that because all the alcohols are taxed on their alcohol content, and that's why you see spirits at a higher tax content, and that's why you see ABC stores in North Carolina. I'd like to talk a little bit briefly about responsibility. Alcohol is a product that needs to be regulated. And we have a great responsibility to ensure that our part is done. We do like to market beer. We think we do it responsibly. We work very hard with retailers to ensure carding is effectively implemented, and that takes year-round, 24 hours, 7 days a week, with all our distributor work. Because, as you know, lots of folks that sell alcoholic products have clerks that may be there for only a few weeks at a time. And so this training is nonstop. We also spend a great deal of time giving free rides at all the major holidays in most major American cities. And we've given away millions of rides over at Christmas time, at New Year's and July 4th, St. Patrick's Day, etc. We have a great responsibility to water. And most of the brewers are doing a really nice job in the brewing industry. Jim was nice enough to reference that I'm vice chairman of the Beer Institute. The beer industry is taking its water consumption down quite dramatically, and we've agreed and have already met our 2015 goal, which was to take our water consumption down by 15%. And we've already met that, and so that amounted to over 250 million gallons of water that we've saved. We also spend a great deal of time cleaning up our fresh water sources in the United States. Our breweries are all located close to water sources in Shenandoah, Virginia, in the Flint River, in Eden, North Carolina, here in an important water catchment area, in the Rocky Mountains, of course, at Golden, Colorado, and in Milwaukee with our brewery there, in Albany, Georgia, a major aquifer there, and in Trenton, Ohio as well. So water is very important, and we have a month that's designated as Water Month for water stewardship. That is October, and late September, mid-October, and I cleaned up the Flint River. I was glad to say there was not too much trash on the Flint River. And we do put our water right back into the river. And the EPA has determined it to be totally fit for drinking. So we're very proud of that. So, last slide here is about people. The most dramatic change in American business, I think, is the cultural change associated with young people and how they view business and what they expect out of their career and life. We call it the millennial cohort. That cohort that turned between 15 and 20 at the time around the time of year 2000. So folks that are between 20 and 30 right now, their expectations of work are very different than ours. When I came to the workforce, and the company said jump, I said how high. Now you ask them to jump, they say how high, what's in it for me, when will I land, what kind of shoes do you have for me, how much cushion is in them. They're much, much more interested in work-life balance, much more interested in long-term career, much more interested in their work, giving them social fulfillment. And companies like ours have got to deal with that. So folks ask me what do I spend my time doing, and I spend about 35% of my time managing up, and about 65% of my time on talent and sustainability and environmental issues. And that's the job of a CEO. So I think we have a good track record. It's a fun business. It will always be changing. And if you don't like life very much, you won't like beer. But if you do like beer, I think you're on for a great ride if you come to work in this industry, because nothing reflects culture as well as beer. So those are my remarks, and I'll open it up for questions. Thanks very much for your time. Yes, sir, down front.
Those of us who lived back in the 30s and the 40s, and we're still alive, thank God, we have seen the explosion of the wine industry.
Yeah.
As a young businessman, I never saw anybody drink wine. It was always beer or spirits, and it's exploded. Now,
Yeah.
it may not be, it may be from a narrow base or something like that, but how has that impacted your industry, and how do you project it will do so in the future?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So 54% of alcohol consumption is beer, but wine and spirits are growing every year. One of the reasons is great wine is not expensive anymore. You know, you can really get great wine and don't have to spend too much money. And that's been a wonderful thing for the wine industry. We're just trying to be more relevant. I think that will continue because more and more areas of the world are putting wine under cultivation. Upstate New York's doing a great job. We've seen California before. We're seeing North Carolina producing wines, and a lot more places around the world producing good wines. So as long as grapes are good, wine's going to do fine. It's not a very good place for business. Folks used to go into sports when they had more money than they had sense. But it actually turned into be a pretty good business. In the last 15 years or so. Wine is like the worst business possible. Lots of our partners who make all their money in beer spend all their money in wine. Pierre Castel owns about 30% of SAB in Africa, and he owns Chateau Beijaville and a few fabulous wines here, and he blows his money in wine every year and has, but he still loves it. So I expect wine to continue. We'll just try to be as relevant as we can and hope all you smart folks will drink beer. Yes, sir.
I wonder if you could talk about your internal decision-making process as you have your big flagship brands.
Yeah.
And you have your craft brands, your sub-premium brands. You have this big fragmented market, but you're best known for these big flagship brands. So what type of toing and froing goes on internally as people wanted to fit in this, but let go into that? And how does that, given the fact you just merged these two companies,
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk about that.
Yeah, well, that's, thank you. Maybe you can tell me how to do it after I give you your answer. I'll give you the best answer I can. We're evolving companies, so the decision protocol is pretty good on the main business. We have a great chief marketing officer. We ask the people to come in and project what the returns are on their projects, on their return on advertising based on the science that we've got. What do they think the returns will be? And if they're wrong, when will they know? And how much money will they have spent by the time they know they're wrong? And so we can exit out quickly if they're wrong. So most of the time folks come in and say, I need this $10 million to do this. I expect this return. I say, when will you know? They say in February. I say, come see me in February. And if you're producing, we'll double down on it. If you're not, we'll pull the plug. On the craft side of the business, it's much more intuitive. And that's tough because they don't have the science, and I don't want them to test everything. If they test everything, some of the craft brewers in this room they'll have already finished. They've already done their batch and made the money and on to the next thing. So we've got to have a much more entrepreneurial culture there. So I give Tom Cardella room to make those decisions, and when it's so much, like, if it's a couple $1 million and we don't have the extra resources, I make the decision. It's true, yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about your experience as a student here at UNC?
Well, I can assure you there are better tasters than me in the room. But I had a great experience here at UNC. I was really lucky to be with a group of friends. I had gone to Episcopal High School in Alexandria, Virginia, and I came back here with a group of friends that were very dear to me and close to me my whole career here. I was an English major because I liked it. And one of my best friends in school was Kimball King, who was in the English department. And he opened up the world to me in a way that, well, frankly, I hadn't seen before. So I had a lovely experience here. I didn't work as hard as I should have because I didn't actually, I thought I was going to law school. I didn't think it would be that relevant. And then I didn't get into law school as I wanted to get in, so I had to find a job really quickly. So folks ask me a lot, how would you give advice to young people? And I'd simply ask them to stay flexible, learn, find jobs you can learn and expand your career in. Not everything is a linear road, as much as you'd like it to be. And no matter how much you plan, stay loose until rigor counts. And in your first couple of jobs, rigor does not count. It really doesn't. You must learn how to work and become productive and work in teams and all these basic things. You can be a craft brewer and start in investment banking. It's perfectly fine. You can make those kind of changes. At least 2 or 3 jobs out, you can do that. So I would just say maybe I learned flexibility at the University of North Carolina. It was a lovely experience for me. Almost all my best friends have come from my time here. Yeah.
Talk about the changing demographics. Could you comment a little bit on the international market? What do you see and what's your priority and focus strategically?
Yeah, really good. The biggest beer in the world, who knows it? And nobody that was with me today. Anybody want to guess the biggest beer in the world? Snow. Snow beer is the largest beer in the world. It's brewed by SAB Miller, which is our parent company, own 58% of MillerCoors. And it's brewed with a joint venture in China. The Chinese government has a quarter of the interest in the joint venture, and Chinese entrepreneurs have another quarter, and SAB Miller has 50%. The market for beer internationally is great. Much faster growth than here. The intensity of competition is much lower, and as you know, wealth creation in the last decade worldwide has exploded, and this has benefited beer. Countries like Poland, Eastern Europe, per capita consumption of beer have risen quite rapidly over the last 15 years, and that's been great for global beer. What are the reasons for that? Disposable income going up. Lots of lesser developed countries, I'll be speaking mostly about African countries right now, they haven't historically had safe alcoholic products to drink. As proud as we are about NASCAR, the moonshine industry is not North Carolina's proudest moment. And lots of African countries have moonshine that actually hurts people. It's not regulated, it's not taxed, and companies coming in and making beer, and much of the beer is sorghum based because it's less expensive, but it's clean and it's safe. And so, for some of the same reasons that beer was popular and wine was popular 1,000 years ago, it is also popular in those countries now because it's safe and easier to find and packaged in convenient ways. So the future of beer is very good worldwide. The places it's slow is in the United States and West Europe. Yeah. Way back in the back there. North Carolina water is always better. No, you can't. You can't add stuff to the water like that. The aquifers that we use are really often take 20 years for the water to get through the aquifer, and putting additives in the water really mess it up. What we've tried to do is change the way the yeast works in the fermenters to make the beer taste the same, but changing the water is usually a bad idea. Yeah.
Could you comment on the power of advertising? You showed us several ads.
Yeah.
And I want to tell a little story. Back in 1972, when I was in business school, my marketing professor said, what you're tasting in beer is really just the advertising story that you've got in your mind. And some of the smaller fellows said, oh no, I know Miller when I know Miller. I said, okay, well, try this with me. And he came in and put all different beers in little paper cups so you didn't know which was which. He said, okay, you guys that know for sure what
Excuse me.
come on up here and tell me which one it is. And several guys tried this and none of them succeeded.
Yeah. Yeah, well, taste is in the mind generally, and you also can't do that with wine. You think you can, but it's very difficult actually. The memory of this many flavor notes is quite tough. Now, to your point, the point I was trying to make is these American light lagers are not differentiated enough. And so we're driving more differentiation intrinsically between Miller Lite and Coors Light. And we like having three actually. MGD 64 because it's control, low calorie. Miller Lite, which is if you want to drink a light beer, how about manning up to the one with the biggest taste? And Rocky Mountain Cold Refreshment. And we think having those three boxes, Bud Light in, and so far that's been successful. Doing sip tests is really a bad way to test. If you drink a whole can, you can tell more. But your point generally holds. A whole lot of this is, well, the great thing about marketing beer is, a lot of it is, who are you? And what beer fits who you are? It's not just about the taste. If it were just about the taste, Anheuser-Busch would not have the kind of share they got. I didn't mean to be critical, too critical. So, yeah, one more question. Thank you, Jim. Yeah.
Going off that, how did, before the merger, or as it was going through, how did the two, marketing strategies kind of come together, and then how were you able to compete with Anheuser-Busch and Budweiser?
Yeah, let me make that quick for all of you kind enough to stay in the room. The first thing we did is deliver fresher beer. We took 45 million road miles out of the network by brewing Coors and Miller in our combined breweries. Beer's heavy. It's also expensive to move, and you probably like beer fresh. So the first thing we did is we improved the quality of the beer by making it fresher. The second thing that we did is we tried to create polarity in the beers. Rocky Mountain Cold Refreshment, and it's a kind of Coors is kind of a fruity, light beer. It's a good beer, but it's very, very fruity and light. It is exactly what it is. Miller Lite's more polarizing. It has the most taste of all the light beers. The number one reason people drink it is because it has more taste. The number one reason people don't drink it is because it has more taste. And that's probably not too surprising. And then you have MGD 64, which is 64 calories, low alcohol, and kind of a health and wellness aspirational kind of thing. So our strategy was to try to get the polarities of the three beers and keep Bud Light in no man's land. So if you would look at their advertising right now, they're neither the most social, nor the best tasting, nor the most refreshing. And we think that muddy middle will be good for us. Thanks very much for your time. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, too. Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So I believe, as Jim said, I'm Andrew Peterson. I'm Assistant Professor of Marketing and Assistant Director of the Center for Integrated Marketing and Sales. So I have a short title. So I'm up here to say thank you for a lot of reasons. First, as a former alum myself, I want to say to Tom, thank you for coming back. As an alum, it's always nice to be in Chapel Hill, I'm sure. I hope this is a chance for you to come back more often. But I'm sure some people have thanked him personally, but this is our chance as a community here to say on behalf of the students, the faculty, alumni, and everyone in Kenan-Flagler community, We want to say thank you for coming so that we could learn and talk about beer at the same time. And I thought, I was misinformed. I thought we'd have one of these under everyone's seat, but we just had one up front. So, but anyway, it was wonderful to have you. And as a token, we want to give you a little gift to say thank you for coming and sharing with us.